You're watching The Last Hike. Today I'll cover 4 arrogant young friends who let their pride laugh off every warning on Angel's Landing, and they walked into heat far more brutal than any of them ever imagined.
They had all the preparations they thought they needed, and were certain they had it all under control. But the heat up on that ridge did something so brutal that even the rangers who had seen it all were shaken by it. It was June 20th, 2018, and on the narrowest part of Angel's Landing in Zion, a half-mile of bare sandstone with sheer drops falling away on both sides, in heat that had already pushed past 100 degrees, a young man named Dashiell Vale was standing in a place no clear-headed person stands, with a brain the heat had quietly stopped working right an hour before. There were 4 of them, all in their early 20s, all certain that the world was a thing that happened to other, slower people. Dashiell Vale was the loud one, the unofficial leader, the kind of young man who had never met a warning sign he did not read as a personal challenge, the one who always pushed the group a little further than it wanted to go, and was always right about it, until the one time he was not. With him were his girlfriend, Marisol Barros, quick and funny and just as fearless as he was, the one with the camera always out, narrating their lives to an audience that grew a little every week. And another couple, Dax Devane and Nisha Rakes, quieter, steadier, the ones who came along because this was supposed to be the trip of the summer, the one they would all be talking about for years at parties and weddings, the story that started with "we almost did not go." They were fit, they were healthy, and they had done a handful of easier hikes together, a few waterfalls, a sunrise summit once that they never stopped mentioning, and somewhere in that small bank of experience they had built a dangerous belief that being young and strong was the same thing as being safe. Angel's Landing does not care how young you are. It has killed the young and the old, the fit and the experienced, the first-timer and the guide, and it does most of its killing in exactly the way these 4 were about to learn. Slowly, and then all at once. Marisol had been building the trip up online for weeks. There were the countdown posts, the gear laid out on a bed, the captions about finally doing the scariest hike in America, about how everyone said it was dangerous and that was the whole point. She posted the drive-in, the 4 of them crammed in the car with the windows down, the first sight of the great red walls of Zion rising up out of the desert. She told her followers to watch her story all day, because they were going to stand on the most terrifying ledge in the country, and she was going to film every second of it. Nowhere in any of it was there a single word about the heat, because to Marisol, the heat was just the weather, an inconvenience, the thing that made the photos look sunny.
I see this every summer, people treating the heat like it's no big deal, just the weather on a sunny day. I promise you, it's the most dangerous thing out there, and it doesn't let up.
Marisol kept posting on the way up because that was the whole point, and her story that day is a strange and awful thing to scroll through now. Early on, it is all energy, the 4 of them mugging for the camera at the trailhead, captions about how this was going to be epic, how scared and excited she was. Then the clips get shorter and more breathless as the switchbacks bite, her face redder, her voice working harder, still grinning but visibly cooking. There is one where she pans across the canyon, and you can see the heat haze shimmering off the rock, and she says something light about how it is absolutely roasting up here, as if it were a fun detail and not a warning. She had tens of thousands of people watching that day, and not one of them, and not her, understood that they were all watching a countdown. To understand what happened to Dashiell Vale, you have to understand the place and the day. Zion in late June is not warm. It is dangerous, with canyon temperatures that climb past 100 degrees in the afternoon, dry and cloudless in the weeks before the summer storms arrive. But the number on a thermometer is the kindest version of the truth, because the canyon walls are bare sandstone that soak up the sun all morning and then radiate it back, so that the real feel on an exposed rock face can run 10 or 15 degrees hotter than the forecast ever says, well past 110 on the rock itself. There is no breeze down in the canyon to carry it away. The heat just pools and presses and builds through the day. Worst of all, in the early afternoon, the exact hours the rangers beg people to stay off the high exposed trails. Angel's Landing is the most exposed trail in the park, a spine of rock with no shade, no water, and nowhere to escape the sun once you are on it. The park rangers say it plainly, on the signs and to your face: do not climb in the afternoon heat. Start before the morning is gone. Carry far more water than you think you need. Eat salt, and turn back the moment anyone feels unwell. The 4 of them rolled into the parking lot a little before noon, in the worst heat of the worst hours of one of the hottest stretches of the year, and laughed about getting a late start.
They started up the most exposed trail in Zion at noon in June. My stomach dropped just reading the time, because everyone who knows that place knows what the midday sun does to a body.
A ranger stopped them near the trailhead, the way the rangers do, and asked the questions they ask 100 times a day in the summer. How much water did they have? Did they know how hot it was going to get? Did they understand that the upper trail had no shade and no water and no easy way down once they were on the chains? Dashiell answered for the group, friendly and certain, holding up the heavy packs full of water bottles, joking that they were practically carrying a swimming pool. The ranger told them to drink steadily, to eat their salty snacks, to turn around the moment anyone felt dizzy or sick, and to remember that more people get hurt going down than coming up. They thanked her, and they screenshotted nothing, and they remembered almost none of it, because they had already decided that the warnings were for other people. It is worth saying that the rangers at a place like Zion are not being dramatic, and they are not trying to ruin anyone's day. They have pulled too many people off that trail not to mean every word. In the summer, they run what amounts to a quiet rescue operation every single afternoon, talking to hikers at the trailhead, watching for the ones who are already flushed and stumbling, calling in helicopters when they can fly, and carrying people out on foot when they cannot, because the heat does not wait, and a body in real trouble has very little time. They had seen 1,000 groups exactly like this one, young and laughing, and overloaded with water bottles, and underloaded with respect, and they had learned that you can warn people all day long, and most of them will smile and nod and do precisely what they were always going to do. The four friends shouldered their packs in the blast furnace heat of the parking lot, took a group photo with the canyon wall behind them, and started up. The first part of the trail is hard but ordinary. A steady paved grind up the canyon wall, switchback after switchback in the full sun. There is a stretch near the top, a brutal set of short steep zigzags cut into the cliff that every hiker who has done it remembers, because it takes the last of your legs right when you think you are nearly there. By the time the four of them reached it, they had stopped laughing. The heat up there was a physical thing, a weight pressing down from the white sky and rising up off the rock at the same time, so there was no direction you could turn to escape it. Their water was already going warm in their packs. Marisol and Nisha were soaked through and quiet, conserving their breath. Dax had a headache he was not mentioning yet, a dull pressure behind his eyes that he told himself was nothing. And Dashiell, the loudest and the proudest, had appointed himself the engine of the group, powering up ahead, doubling back, urging them on, drinking constantly from the hose of his water pack to show how strong he still felt. He was drinking more water than any of them, far more proud of it, lecturing them about staying hydrated between gulps. He thought that made him the smart one. It was, in fact, the second thing that was killing him.
Nobody ever taught these kids the second half of the rule. I grew up hearing, drink lots of water too, and out in that kind of heat, that advice alone can quickly set you up to die.
Nobody in that group knew the first thing about the difference between losing water and losing salt. Why would they? They had grown up being told one simple rule about heat. Drink water, drink lots of it, drink more than you think you need, and they had absorbed it as gospel without ever hearing the dangerous second half. In ordinary life, the simple rule is fine. On a short walk, in a city, on a normal warm day, you cannot really get this wrong. But out on an exposed desert trail in 100-degree heat, sweating out salt by the hour for hour after hour, the simple rule curdles into a trap, and the person who follows it most diligently, who drinks the most and feels the most responsible about it, can be the one who walks straight into the worst of it. Dashiell was that person. He was doing the thing he had been taught his whole life to do, and he was doing more of it than anyone, and it was quietly poisoning the balance his brain needed to function.
Here's the part almost nobody knows, and it's the part that gets me. He was drinking gallons of water, and that very thing was quietly helping to take him down.
Dashiell had been narrating his own day into his phone. Short clips meant for later, the way confident people do when they assume there will always be a later. In them, he is breathless but grinning, bragging about how the others are struggling and he feels great, how the heat is nothing, how he could turn around and do the whole thing twice. In one, he says his head feels a little weird, but waves it off, laughs, says he just needs to chug more water, and takes a long demonstrative drink on camera to prove the point, the way a man does when he is sure he has the answer. There is another where he cannot quite remember whether they have been hiking for 1 hour or 2, and he laughs that off as well. It is hard to watch now, knowing what that headache was, knowing that the long drink he took to fix it was the exact wrong thing, that with every confident gulp of plain water, he was washing the salt out of a body that was screaming for it, fixing the problem in the precise way that made it worse. What was happening inside Dashiell Vale is one of the cruelest tricks the desert plays, and it has killed hikers who did everything they thought was right. When you sweat for hours in that kind of heat, you do not just lose water, You lose salt, a lot of it, far more than people realize, soaking it out through your skin hour after hour. Your body runs on a careful balance of water and salt, and your brain in particular depends on it. Every signal it sends riding on that chemistry. If you drink only plain water to keep up, you keep the water topped off while the salt keeps draining away until the balance tips and the cells of your body, including the cells of your brain, begin to swell. The condition is called hyponatremia, water intoxication, and the terrible part is that its early signs, the headache, the nausea, the confusion, the weakness, look almost exactly like dehydration. So the dying hiker does the sensible thing, the thing that feels right, the thing every instinct and every summer of advice screams at him to do. He drinks more water. And the more he drinks, the worse it gets, the more his brain swells, a downward spiral disguised the whole way as good sense, as responsibility, as exactly the right move. Layer that on top of ordinary heat exhaustion, the dizziness and the weakness and the clouded judgment that the heat alone produces, and you have a young man whose brain is slowly going offline, who feels in his confusion like he is handling it better than anyone, standing at the bottom of the most dangerous half-mile of trail in the park.
Picture it with me. His judgment failing and his head full of fog, with a narrow strip of rock ahead and a 1,000-foot drop on either side. I can't imagine a worse place to start losing your mind.
The footage that was recovered later tells the same story to anyone who knows what they are looking at, which is that the strangest part was how normal Dashiell seemed if you were not looking closely. He is talking the whole time, joking, telling them to hurry up, complaining about how slow they are, and all of it sounds like an ordinary guy having an ordinary loud day. It is only in the small things, the ones that mean nothing until you know how it ends, that you can see it. The way he keeps asking what time it is and forgetting the answer, the way he pours water over his head and then takes another long drink and then does it again a minute later, the way his sentences start somewhere and end somewhere else entirely. Nobody around him knew to look. They had no reason in the world to think that the friend cracking jokes beside them was a person whose brain was quietly drowning. They reached Scout Lookout, the wide, flat shoulder where the maintained trail ends and the real Angel's Landing begins, where a sign warns you plainly that people have died just beyond this point and tells you to think hard before you go on. This is the place to stop. This is where a great many people, looking at that narrow spine of rock and the drops on either side and feeling the heat hammering down, make the wise choice and turn around with nothing lost but a view. There is no shame in it. Rangers will tell you that turning around at Scout Lookout is not failing the hike, it is passing the most important test the hike gives you. Dax wanted to stop. He said so, quietly, that he had a headache and the heat was too much and the ledge looked insane in these conditions. Nisha was not sure either, looking at the chains shimmering in the heat and the long fall beyond them. But Dashiell, swaying a little on his feet in a way none of them read correctly, would not hear it. They had not driven all this way and climbed all this way to quit at the last half mile. He called Dax soft. He laughed, a little too loud, and clapped him on the shoulder and said the view from the top would be the best thing any of them ever saw. Then he started out onto the chains, and Marisol followed him, filming, and the other two, not wanting to be the cowards of the story, came after.
One of them wanted to turn around, said it out loud, and he was right. I think about that quiet kid getting teased out of it more than almost anything in this story.
The final stretch of Angel's Landing is half a mile of scrambling along a fin of sandstone in places only a few feet wide, with chains bolted into the rock to hold onto and sheer drops of 1,000 feet and more falling away on both sides. On a cool, clear morning, clear-headed and careful, it is a serious and dangerous piece of trail that demands total focus and a good grip and steady legs. And even then, it kills people, careful people, experienced people, people who did everything right and slipped anyway. It is not a thing to attempt with a body in revolt and a mind going dim. But that is exactly what Dashiell Vale was doing, out in front, moving in the loose, sloppy, overconfident way of a man whose brain was no longer sending the right signals, gripping the chains a beat too late, planting his feet a little wrong, laughing too loud at a height that should sober anyone. His friends, strung out behind him on the rock, could see that something was off, that he was being clumsier and louder than the situation called for, but they read it the way they had read Dashiell their whole lives, as Dashiell being Dashiell, showing off, clowning, milking the moment for Marisol's camera. They did not know they were watching a person come apart. They did not know that the thing they were laughing at was a brain losing its grip on the world. There is a video Marisol took on the ridge, one of the last, and it is unbearable to know what you are looking at. Dashiell is ahead of her on the narrowest section, turning back toward the camera to say something, grinning, his words slurred just slightly in a way that sounds in the moment like a joke and sounds now like a warning. He lets go of the chain to spread his arms wide, to ham it up for her, to show how unafraid he is, swaying on a strip of rock barely wider than a sidewalk with the whole canyon yawning behind him. She is laughing as she films. You can hear her telling him to stop, to hold on, but she is laughing because none of them, not one, understood that the clowning was not bravado anymore. It was a brain that had stopped being able to tell a ledge from a living room. And here's the thing that makes Angel's Landing so much crueler than it first appears. Once Dashiell was out on that spine, there was no quick way to get him off it. You cannot carry a sick adult back along a knife of rock where there is barely room for one person to pass another, where every few feet you both have to share a single chain with hikers coming the other way. The trail that is dangerous going up is more dangerous coming down, when your legs are shot and the heat has had longer to work on you, which is exactly why the rangers say that more people are hurt descending than climbing. If anyone had recognized what was wrong with Dashiell at Scout Lookout, there was still a chance, a slow, careful walk back down to shade and salt and help. Out on the ridge, with his brain already failing, there was no good option left at all. The decision that could have saved him was the one quiet voice they laughed off at the last safe place to turn around.
What haunts me about the footage is that she's laughing while she films him, because to her, he's just goofing around. She had no idea that she was watching the last minute of his life.
It did not look like a slip, the way the other hikers on the ridge would describe it afterward, in the broken way that people describe the thing they cannot stop seeing. It looked, they said, like he simply forgot where he was. He had let go of the chain again to do something with his hands, to gesture, to point at something only he could see, and he took a step that was not there to take, an easy, confident step toward the edge, the way you might step off a curb you were sure was there. But this is where the cruelest physics of that narrow place took over, because Dashiell did not go cleanly. As he pitched sideways, he reached out, the way a falling body does, and the nearest person to him was Marisol, a step behind with the camera up, and his weight caught her before she could even understand what was happening. On flat ground, she would have braced and held him. On a strip of rock barely wider than a sidewalk, with nothing to anchor against and 1,000 feet of air on both sides, there is no bracing. There is only the awful, simple arithmetic of two bodies and one of them already going over. Dashiell Vale fell from the narrowest part of Angel's Landing, and he took the woman who loved him with him, and the two of them were gone into the canyon before the sound of it even reached the others.
All my years around these places, I've never gotten used to this. Two people gone in a single second, one reaching for the other. There was no time for anyone to even shout.
That left Nisha alone on the ridge, the quiet one, the one who had wanted to turn back at the bottom and been talked out of it, frozen on a strip of rock with three of the people she loved most, suddenly gone into the air around her. What happened to her is in some ways the hardest part of all, because she did not fall. She froze, and she could not move. And she was already deep in the same heat the others had been fighting all day. Her own body cooking on that shadeless spine of rock in temperatures past 100 degrees, hotter still on the bare stone. Other hikers tried to talk her back along the chains, but she had locked up completely, sitting down on the rock in the full sun, and in that heat, sitting still is its own kind of dying. By the time rescuers fought their way out along that narrow exposed spine to reach her, slowed by the terrain and the brutal heat working on them too, her body had been pushed past what it could take. She survived long enough to be reached, and not long enough to be saved. The heat that had started with Dashiell finished with her, and it took the whole group in a single afternoon. What happened in the next few seconds is the part the surviving witnesses, other hikers frozen on the chains nearby, could never quite agree on, because it happened too fast and too horribly to take in. Dax was closest behind Marisol, and he lunged, the way any person lunges when someone they love is going over an edge, a pure animal reflex with no thought in it at all. He got a hand on her, and the ridge did to him what it had just done to her. Some of the witnesses said he was pulled, some said he overbalanced reaching and simply could not stop. It does not really matter which, because the result was the same. A third body gone off the same few feet of rock in the span of a held breath, the chain swinging empty where three people had been clipped past it a moment before. Three of the four were gone, and the canyon below had taken all of them, and the heat pressed down on the silence afterward like a hand. Because the most cruel part only came clear afterward. In the autopsy and the investigation and the slow, grim reconstruction of the day, the headache Dashiell had waved off, the weird swimming feeling in his head, the slurred words and the sloppy steps, and the questions he kept forgetting the answers to, none of it had been simple clumsiness or showing off or the heat just making him goofy. His body had been deep into heat exhaustion and very likely into the salt-starved spiral of hyponatremia, his brain swelling slowly against the inside of his skull as the chemistry that keeps a person upright and thinking and afraid of heights quietly came undone. The water he kept drinking to feel better had been making it worse with every single sip. By the time he stepped out onto that ridge, the most dangerous half mile of trail in the park, he was, in every way that matters, already gone. a man whose mind had stopped being able to keep him alive, walking out onto the one place on Earth least forgiving of a single wrong step. He had been dying since somewhere down in those switchbacks, slowly, invisibly, while he laughed and lectured the others about hydration and felt, in the fog of it, stronger than all of them. The fall was just the part the camera could see. The dying had started a long time before, in plain sight, disguised as the healthiest one on the trail, and when it finally tipped over the edge, it did not go alone, it took everyone standing near it.
This is what I mean when I say the heat had already taken him down on the trail below. The ledge only finished what the sun had started, and not one of the four ever understood that.
There were no survivors to come down off the mountain and tell it, and that is its own kind of horror. Four young people who drove out to chase a view and a photograph and simply never came back, a whole group erased from one trail on one afternoon. What came down instead was the footage recovered from a phone, the bright, excited morning clips, and the breathless switchback clips, and then the last terrible seconds that the investigators had to watch and the families never should. They had not been reckless people, not really, no more than any of us were at that age. They had simply believed the oldest and most human lie there is, that the warnings were for other people, that being young and strong and together made them safe, that a mountain which kills careful, experienced hikers would somehow make an exception for them because the day was supposed to be fun and the photos were going to be amazing. The heat did not hate them. It does not hate anyone. It is just always there on those summer afternoons, patient and enormous and completely indifferent, doing what heat does to a body, whether that body is proud or humble. Dashiell Vale walked up certain he had the mountain beaten before he started, and it had beaten him long before he reached the edge. And when it took him, it took everyone who had followed him out onto that rock. The worst part is how ordinary the first mistake was, how many thousands of people make some smaller version of it every single summer and simply get lucky enough to walk back down and never know how close they came.